Alright, so I think by now we are probably all in agreement that climate change sucks and we need to do something about it. The question is always, why aren't we doing something about this? It's not like it's a new thing. We've been talking about the greenhouse effect in global conversation since the 1980s, and international science has pretty much been in agreement that climate change is happening and will be bad, if not for the exact details as to the extent of its badness, for like 15, 20 years now. As a matter of fact, in 1958, the National Academy of Sciences published a booklet titled Planet Earth, The Mysteries with 100,000 Clues, which contained this paragraph, quote, "Our industrial civilization has been pouring carbon dioxide into the atmosphere at a great rate. By the year 2000, we will have added 70% more carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. If it remained, it would have a marked warming effect on the Earth's climate, but most of it would probably be absorbed into the oceans. Conceivably, however, it could cause significant melting of the great ice caps and raise sea levels in time." End quote. 1958. So why aren't we doing something? Well, there's two answers to that question. First, we are. And we'll talk more specifically about some of the things that we're doing toward the end of the semester, so hang on for that conversation. The second answer has to do with the fact that while a lot of scientists are involved in policy, it is not scientists that make policy. And the people who do make policy have a lot of other concerns than simply, what is it that scientists agree is important to do? Now, next week we'll talk more about what changes to society might look like in order to appropriately and responsibly deal with climate change. Speaking of which, our reading for next week is from the other book that you have to purchase or check out from the library. This is Heat, How to Stop the Planet from Burning by George Monbiot. I'm sure that's not actually how you pronounce his name, but I've never met him, so I'm not entirely sure about that. My apologies, George. But this week, we are more interested in the political reasons that may inhibit climate change action. So, the readings deal with politics in the United States. They explain how climate change has become politicized over the years in our country. To be clear, climate change is a scientific issue. It can't really become true or untrue based on your political leanings or your worldview, as opposed to, say, other contentious issues like abortion. Now, abortion can be moral or immoral, ethical or unethical, depending on what you believe. People could make law or policy arguments based on the Constitution, based on the Supreme Court, depending on what the Constitution was written to say, depending on what the Supreme Court has previously ruled. Either side of the debate could be right, or more to the point, both sides could be right simultaneously, but just depending on your point of view. Please don't debate abortion in the forums. That is not the point of this class. I'm only using this to illustrate that this is a hotly debated issue in politics that is backed by a subjective truth. It depends on where you're coming from. It depends on your culture, your political leanings, your religion, your personal philosophy, whatevs. But it's not something that is based on a scientific fact like climate change. Climate change is not like this. This past week even, one of the most famous and most famously outspoken skeptics of climate change came forward with evidence that climate change is happening. His study was also founded by the Koch brothers, who are some of the one-percenters who have been famously outspoken and monetarily outspoken about climate change being a hoax. Even these guys, when gathering and studying evidence of the world's climate systems, have come to the conclusion of the fact of climate change. They have not stated that it was man-made. It is. And they have not prescribed a course of action, although Richard Muller, who's the skeptic of the study, he has said that it's probably a good idea to stop dumping so much carbon into our atmosphere. But the fact of climate change is happening is really not up for debate in any serious debate when you're using actual evidence. Of course, anyone who has seen the media at all about climate change has seen that the fact of climate change is in fact hotly debated, mostly amongst politicians and political pundits. So how can this be? Well, the fact of the matter is that although climate change existing is not really up for serious debate, what to do about climate change is up for debate. The what to do about climate change is where we see the subjective right or wrong, the subjective yes or no, the subjective truth about the proper course of action. Regardless of what is said, this is actually the core of the climate change debate, what to do about climate change. Now, some of the people who are in power, and a lot of the people who fund the people who are in power, or support them, or connected to them in some way, and here, yes, I'm talking about oil industries, logging industries, and really quite a lot of industries that are polluting by the ton load. These people have a vested economic reason for not doing very much about climate change, because it would be very costly for their industries to retrofit with greener technologies, and or the industry may simply have to cease to exist in order to appropriately and effectively respond to climate change. And they certainly don't want that. Now, some other people who are in power have very strong political philosophies dealing with what is morally, ethically, fiscally, socially, right or wrong about the way a government is meant to interact with her people. In the United States, many social or political conservatives believe very strongly in the free market. Now, the free market means when business interactions are not regulated by the government. In a free market philosophy, the government should have no say over who you can buy or sell to with your products. The government should have no say over how you do business, over how much you pay your workers, over which or whose resources you exploit to create or distribute your product. The government should not have a say over if or what you pollute. This is a problem with climate change, because in order to appropriately and effectively address climate change, we're probably going to need a very high level of government regulation to make the changes that society needs that are necessary to address this, and that will be sustainable over a long period of time. So if you don't believe that the government should have the power for that level of regulation, there's a mismatch between politics and action. People like to be consistent. This is a psychological fact. Most people do very poorly with cognitive dissonance, which is when we believe two things simultaneously that are logically inconsistent. A minor example. I believe that we should love and respect all life forms on Earth. I see a cockroach and I smash it. This is logically inconsistent, and if I think about it, it causes cognitive dissonance. I believe in loving and respecting all things, which includes not just killing them on a whim, and yet I killed something for no other reason than it scared me or disgusted me or I wanted to. What I must do now, psychologically, is rectify this cognitive dissonance, because this inconsistency is making me uncomfortable. I don't know where I stand with myself anymore. Which is really true about me? That I think it's okay to kill, or that I love and respect all living things? I can decide, for example, well, I liked killing the cockroach, so obviously killing is okay, and so I'm going to start killing anything or anyone I want to. The obvious problem here is that this decision, while it does rectify my cognitive dissonance, it also opens this kind of Pandora's box of changes to my belief system, to my life, to my worldview, my philosophies, my behavior, my actions, my lifestyle. It's a lot of change. On the other hand, I can decide, well, I love and respect all things but pests, because they can cause health problems with other things that I love and respect. So it's okay to kill cockroaches, but not puppies or people or anything else. So this decision rectifies my cognitive dissonance without causing a major upheaval in my life, which is good for me. I no longer feel uncomfortable from the cognitive dissonance and I don't have to re-examine everything about myself and my life in order to move on from this point. To rectify cognitive dissonance, you don't necessarily have to examine the issues in thorough depth or weigh the pros and cons of every belief. As a matter of fact, that may lead to more cognitive dissonance. It might be better to come up with a simple justification and leave it there. In fact, I may even become even more entrenched in this justification I created if it's challenged, because the justification is protecting my internal consistency. So you say, Katie, what about that spider you just killed? It's not poisonous, it eats malaria-causing mosquitoes, it's good for the things that you love and respect. But nope, it's a pest. I'm not re-examining because I have to protect myself from cognitive dissonance. I don't want to think of myself as a killer. I want to think of myself as someone who loves and respects, and I have to justify these two opposing things within my life. Back to climate change. If you take it for a given fact that climate change is happening, whatever the cause, you must also take it for given that it is a bad thing that we have to address in order to protect our world and our species on into the future. Change is hard, we know this, and we'll talk about this some more next week. The best way to make such a large-scale societal changes that are needed to address climate change is with heavy international agreements and government regulations. If you believe that we must address climate change, and if you believe that the best way to do this is government regulation, and if you believe very strongly against government regulation, you have a problem with cognitive dissonance. There are several ways to address this. 1. Change your entire political philosophy and worldview, opening a Pandora's box of change in your life and in the way you see the world. 2. Determine another equally effective way to address climate change, which is going to be very hard, and honestly it might be impossible. 3. Develop skepticism about the fact of climate change, so that it does not need to be addressed. The only change required with this option is your change in acceptance of the fact of climate change. End of story. Your cognitive dissonance is settled and you can move on. In my opinion, and early studies back this up, but it is my opinion that the reason for the climate change is so hotly debated, the reason that something that is not up for debate is debated anyway, is that the alternative is to debate the actual question, what do we do about this? Which is a debatable question. But the answers that come up in this debate are very unsettling to a lot of people. And so for these people to avoid that debate altogether, they must instead maintain their skepticism, and they must instead keep that debate alive. And this is why climate change is political. So, class, the readings and my mini-lecture are all to do with politics of climate change in the United States. For your media share exercise, which is combined again this week with the group discussions, find media or journal articles that deal with the politics of climate change in other countries. Open a discussion based on your media. Also start one more topic of conversation, something within the politics of climate change, here, abroad, it's up to you. 6 comments total, and you'll get credit this week for both the media share grades and the discussion grades for these conversations. So, great job everyone, and good luck, and I will see you online.